Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure podcast. We're so glad that you came to join us. You downloaded our episode. We've been having a great time. It's just amazing to see the number of downloads that we have week after week. So grateful for each and every one of you, whether you found us on our Instagram page or our Facebook page or the internet or whatever. We're so glad and we're so grateful that you decided to join us. This week, we have an unbelievable guest. It's Mr. Ben Furimsky. He's the president and CEO of Fly Fishing Show. He's just a fascinating story of how his family grew up, how he grew up in a fly fishing family. And he tells the story of the Fly Fishing Show and what it's all about. Talks a little about Tenkara and about his life. And an excellent guest. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, we have Ben Furimsky with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Ben.
No problem.
Well, before we get started here, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into fly fishing, Ben?
Oh, I originally got into fly fishing through my dad. He introduced me to fly fishing at a young age. I was probably fishing on my own by the time I was 5.
Well, that's great. Have you always lived there in Colorado, or is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, starting a lot of my fly fishing at a young age, fishing ponds for, bluegills, sunfish, bass, things like that, and then progressed into trout and saltwater in New Jersey.
Well, that's great. So you've been fishing pretty much your whole life, and it seems like you've represented pretty much everything in the industry, from sales, marketing, everything. How did you end up guiding, Ben, being a fishing guide?
I would say I probably ended up being a fishing guide because I had gone with some guides in my past that, just kind of inspired me, and I wanted to give it a try.
Is there a guide in particular that inspired you, Ben, or?
Well, a couple, but not necessarily. Actually one has long since passed away, and just some of the icons in our sport. I was fortunate enough to meet.
Yeah, and so
people like Joe Humphreys and George Harvey.
That's great. And I also noticed you had on your website Lefty Cray there at one of your fly fishing shows there. I mean, did you know him pretty well, or do you know him? Or?
Yeah, I've known him for a long time. I probably first met Lefty when I was maybe 14 or 15, I would have to say. And we've been friends ever since.
How did you meet Lefty Cray?
Well, originally, my dad had started something called Trout Masters Weekend, and it was a weekend-long event of fly fishing, like a fly fishing school, basically for the weekend. And he was one of the headliners, and that's where we first met. And
you said that your dad started the fly fishing show?
Well, yeah, this was something that he had started, this Trout Masters Weekend, and he was doing this as more of kind of a private school, and his partner was doing a small show as well, and they kind of teamed up together and formed the Fly Fishing Show, and together they started that 26 years ago.
Wow, that's quite a legacy. 26 years. Now you're the co-director of the show, or?
No, I'm now president and CEO.
Okay. And as far as, congratulations, by the way, but I mean, those are some pretty big shoes to fill. I mean, as that transition happened, was it a pretty natural transition, or were you a little nervous about the responsibility, or?
Well, yeah, the biggest thing is that it was taking on additional jobs without someone filling it. So when I was co-director, I was working with my dad. His partner had retired, and I kind of took over his role, as well as establishing some new things as we moved into more of a technological age. So we had to establish some of that stuff, and social media and those things. And so I created more jobs for myself in that process. And then as my dad began to retire, I took over all of his jobs. So I kind of have three positions now. No one's filled the shoes underneath. I just keep taking on another role.
Mm-hmm. What excites you about the show?
Oh, we consider ourselves a show family, and even though it's a lot of work and there's a bunch of anxiety and stress going into the show season for us as well as exhibitors and getting all their stuff ready and, wondering how things are going to go. Once we arrive on site, everybody's always kind of excited to see each other because we travel around for 7 weeks and a couple of months basically, and we're all the same people together all the time, and you get to be pretty good friends. So then you don't see each other through the main fishing season, and when it comes back around, it's always nice to see everybody. So that's really one of the most exciting things on my side for being on the industry side of it.
What do you see as the future of this show?
What do I see as the future of the show? We have been working pretty hard to broaden the audience, both gender, race, age, everything, and really trying to make it into a fun event where people want to be there just to find out what's happening and to be what's happening.
And what kind of steps have you guys taken to be more inclusive and to gain a bigger audience?
Well, we've added the women's showcase. We've added some kids zones. We've got live music entertainment. We've got film festivals, all sorts of demos, all sorts of programs for all skill levels. And I really tried to focus on making sure that there's something for everyone. Nothing drives me more crazy than when someone comes to the show and they say, "Oh, well, I didn't see anything for me." So I want to make sure there's something for everybody.
Well, that's great. And what do you see? I mean, we had Karen Miller, the Tenkara angler, on recently, and she's all about Tenkara, and you are a Tenkara fan as well. So my question to you is in two parts. Number one is where do you see? I mean, we're seeing a big surge of female anglers, and are you seeing more female anglers showing up at your shows? I mean, what are you seeing in that as you have your finger on the pulse of the industry?
Oh yeah, there's definitely more female anglers, and more than anything, we see more female anglers showing up with their female friends as a group of anglers, and also showing up by themselves rather than just with a boyfriend or husband that fly fishes. There's a lot of independence and a lot more women in the sport in general. But they're also getting out and partaking. And we also have a lot of companies that represent them at the shows. So there's more offerings for them to bring them in as well.
Now, the second part of the question is Tenkara. How did you end up getting into Tenkara, Ben?
Well, Daniel Galhardo, who started Tenkara USA and basically introduced it to the United States, is a good friend of mine. And he kind of got his start by exposing the product at our shows and did the whole tour for a number of years. And he's still a very active exhibitor at our shows and one of our guest celebrity speakers.
How did you end up saying, "Hey, this is something I want to try out," and you liked it, and it's even on, you even advertise it on your personal website? How did you? What made you decide to try that out?
Well, there's people that look at it first on the controversial thing. It just doesn't have a reel in a traditional line is the only thing that makes it slightly different. But it's a very historic way of fly fishing, and you can get as much of a purist as you want. I tease a lot of anglers that do everything to learn how to become a better fly fisherman, and then you see them out there with a bobber and a worm on. So that can be just as controversial, or nymphing versus dry fly, or all these different things. You could make it controversial, but that's just us digging into it and getting nitpicky, but it's still casting a fly rod and using a fly. And I was attracted to the simplicity of it. That's what really, really made me interested. When I'm fly fishing, no matter how it is, I'm typically the guy that walks out there with just a box in my pocket and a little spool of tippet and my tools, and that's it.
What is it about fly fishing that keeps you coming back to the river, Ben?
Oh, where it takes me. I just love being out there. I've always said that my favorite thing about fly fishing is what it teaches you and where it takes you. It's not actually doing it, although that's pretty therapeutic and enjoyable, but you can end up on some really beautiful places fly fishing, or even learn a bit about some crummy places. I mean, I fished for a number of species in some urban settings where there's trash around you and shopping carts laying in the water, but you can still catch some fish, and they're survivors, and it makes you start to clean up that and take care of the environment.
You said two things, where it takes you and where it teaches you. What are some of the things that fly fishing has taught you, Ben?
Well, just that. It teaches you about the environment where the fish live. You know, there's a lot of appeal in fly fishing that you can easily relate to, say, golf, because of, I mean, the bottom line is you could have a great day one day. You're never going to be perfect. The next day could be your worst day, and then it goes back and forth. So the challenge always brings you back to doing it. But the big difference is you really start learning about your environment through fly fishing. You learn about the insects in trout waters or fresh waters. You could be learning about migratory behaviors. You could be learning about bait fish, temperatures, weather patterns, moons and tides, and all that kind of stuff. So you can get pretty scientific about it.
And you also mentioned places that it takes you. I know you said some urban settings, but what are some of those memorable places that fly fishing has taken you, Ben?
Oh boy, that's a tough one because every time I go somewhere, I always end up leaving thinking I got to come here again next year. And I mean, I should be going fishing every week on a new vacation if I was doing that right now. So there's a lot of great places. I love fishing the flats in the salt water. I love fishing for stripers in New Jersey. I love trout fishing. I've been, over the last couple of years, gotten pretty into jungle fishing. So there's quite a variety of stuff.
Tell us a little bit about jungle fishing. Are you doing that like down in South America or?
Yeah, fishing in Bolivia and Brazil.
For the golden Dorado, or?
Yeah, I did that in Bolivia, and they're just an amazing, amazing fish. They're like taking a striper, a bluefish, and a trout and mashing them all together. They can be spooky and held up like a trout in a trout-like setting, or they can be blitzing bait in a frenzy. So everything in between. And they're one mean critter, and they jump like crazy. So really great fly rod fare. In fact, throughout the jungle, there's a variety of really great fly rod fish that people don't really realize. A lot of people think about jungle and the Amazon and big, wide, slow, muddy rivers, but there's some mountain streams basically.
Do they not see a whole lot of pressure then?
No, and a lot of those fish follow some migratory patterns. One of the reasons they don't see a lot of pressure is in the jungles, you basically have a rainy season and a dry season. It's not like, that's their winter and summer. Mm-hmm. So in the dry season, that's when the waters come down and clear up and the fish congregate. So in the rainy season, when the waters are high, they're difficult to access and people aren't really fishing for them, and they're spread out. So you get a fresh start to the season every year and fresh fish.
How did you end up fishing down there in South America? What made you decide to go to the jungle?
Well, I really enjoy catching different species of fish. That's one of my favorite things and it ties in with the learning about the fish. I just like to learn about the different fish, and I've caught close to 300 different species on the fly rod, and I just like to try for different things. So before I had fished in the jungle, it appealed to me. I just wanted to see what kind of fish I could catch there and what kind of variety it offered.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think it's natural for mankind to want to go into the jungle, to want to conquer fish? I mean, is that a natural thing you think in all of us to explore and to get out in the wilderness?
Well, I'd love to explore. I'm famous for having, around the next bend syndrome. I always want to see what's around the next bend, and I'll find myself having fished all day, never turning around, and then I have to be, back where I started in a short amount of time. So often returning in the dark. But yeah, I love to explore, and I think there's definitely a group of people or a gene in people that may make them feel like they need to explore and try new things and visit new spots. But there's also, operations that can take you comfortably to exotic places.
You talked a little bit about what fly fishing has taught you. What has it taught you philosophically as a human being? What has fly fishing taught you?
Well, that's a pretty deep question. I think it teaches you to appreciate your surroundings and to, respect nature and as well as one another for what is out there. And equality is one big thing. One of my favorite sayings is that, fish don't have egos. So it doesn't matter who's on the other end of the line. I mean, you always hear the story of the kid that just threw in and catches a trophy fish, and he didn't really care. It doesn't make a difference to him. He's happy that he caught it. But, the guy that spent his life trying to perfect the technique may never even catch something like that. So there's luck as much as just practice and not being judged by the fish and just doing the best that you can.
Yeah, if you get an ego, then just take a 7 or 8 year old boy out fishing, and and it seems to tear down your ego pretty quick if if you think it's
or try a different technique. That's you mentioned the Tenkara. That's another appeal to it. I also take out a spay rod or a switch rod or a bamboo rod, and I'm when I was guiding, I was pretty known for taking something that was working really well and changing it. But that kept me ahead of the curve as well. If I had a fly, if I was using a fly or a rig or a technique that was just doing really well, it was almost like I'd get bored with it and just start switching it up and seeing what else was working. And then when that technique wasn't working so well, or the hatch ended and something else was starting, I was always ahead of the curve and still catching fish when other people were trying to adjust because they just kept sticking with the thing that was working. But, that's just challenging yourself. It's great to have a great day and to be slaying them. But sometimes when you're doing that, it's fun to experiment and try other things too. You never know. You might just start catching bigger fish. You might not catch as many, but you never know what's going to happen by trying something out of the box.
For sure. Now, Ben, how long did you guide for?
I still guide occasionally with some of my regular old time clients. But I guided for about 20 years.
What's your most memorable guiding experience?
I'd have to say with a good client of mine, Michael Norton, who's just as much a friend now. I put him on a 13-pound rainbow that swam up right next to a rock that I was sitting on, and I had to just kind of whisper to him to hand me his rig, and because I could see what the fish was feeding on, I retied it real subtly and had him cast over the rock that I was sitting on, and I saw the fish eat it and said, "Set the hook," and he set the hook, and the thing took off, and he panicked, but we ended up getting it in. It was a beautiful, beautiful trout, biggest fish I had a client land. But there's a lot of great memories and stories.
Is there anything in particular that one of your clients taught you, maybe as you were a younger guide or coming up in the business? I mean, is there something that an old timer may have taught you that stuck with you?
I'm not sure what you mean by teaching me, but there's things that I've learned in fly fishing. I mean, you mentioned an older client. I had an old gentleman that I used to guide. Well, it was more his son who wasn't young, and he would bring his dad along, who I really couldn't get to do anything but just drag the line. He wouldn't cast, he wouldn't mend, he wouldn't do about anything. So I was determined to get the guy some fish, and I ended up designing a fly just for him. And he actually ended up one day, he caught a lot more than his son that was a pretty good angler, just dragging his line behind the boat.
Wow.
So that was pretty exciting.
Oh, that's really awesome, Ben. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it, and carving out a little time after dinner for us. We really appreciate you taking some time. Thank you, Ben.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you for joining us for another week of the Remote No Pressure podcast. Be sure to go to our website at remotenопроpressure.com and sign up for our mailing list. Like I told you the last few weeks, we have some exciting news about to come out, and I'm very, very happy to send that out. We're going to send it out to our mailing list first, but we have some very exciting news coming up. Also, if you don't follow us on our Facebook or our Instagram or whatever, go to it. Go find us on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find us on our website at remotenопроpressure.com. There's plenty of links there, but more than anything, thank you so much for downloading our episode week after week after week. We're approaching episode number 50. I'm super excited about that. Well, until next time, go fishing.